The sky over Silver Pine Estates wasn't just gray. It was the color of a bruised ego. For 3 days, the clouds had been unburdening themselves, dumping 2 feet of powder onto our quiet cul-de-sac. In most neighborhoods, this would be a time for hot cocoa and communal shoveling. But Silver Pine wasn't most neighborhoods. It was a kingdom, ruled by the Architectural Review Committee, and its iron-fisted monarch, Regina Vance. I stood at my floor-to-ceiling living room window, a mug of black coffee warming my palms. I'm Elias Thorne, a retired civil engineer, who moved here for the tranquility. What I found instead was a homeowners association that measured the height of your fescue with a ruler and sent formal warnings if your holiday lights weren't a specific shade of warm white. The conflict between Regina and me had been simmering for months. It started when I refused to take down a bird feeder she deemed visually disruptive to the minimalist aesthetic. Since then, I had been the target of every petty citation in the book. But today, the pettiness was taking a physical frozen form. I watched as a massive industrial yellow plow, hired by the HOA, rounded the corner of the cul-de-sac. Usually the plows pushed the snow to the center of the turn or onto the common areas. But as the driver approached my property, the last house on the bend, he didn't lift the blade. He angled it. With a mechanical roar, a tidal wave of heavy, slushy, gray-flecked snow was launched directly onto my driveway. It wasn't just a dusting. It was a 4-foot-high wall of ice that completely sealed my garage. I saw Regina standing on her porch across the street, wrapped in a fur-trimmed parka, clutching a clipboard. She didn't look away. She didn't wave. She simply watched the plow driver finish his arc, leaving my neighbor's frontages pristine while burying mine under the collective weight of the entire street's runoff. She made a note on her clipboard, turned on her heel, and went inside. The message was clear: submit or stay buried. For an hour, I sat in my armchair, staring at that wall of white. My knees aren't what they used to be, and the thought of manual shoveling made my spine ache in anticipation. But then I remembered the old beast sitting in the back of my shed. Years ago, during my time on site developments, I'd acquired an industrial-grade twin-stage snowblower, a monstrosity with a 42-inch clearing width and a discharge chute that could launch a slush ball into the next county. I'd kept it maintained more out of habit than necessity. Today it was a necessity. I bundled up in my heavy canvas work gear, pulled on my thermal gloves, and headed to the shed. The engine groaned at first, a metallic protest against the cold. But with one steady pull of the starter cord, it roared to life. The vibration traveled up my arms, a familiar, powerful hum. I didn't start with my driveway. That would be too simple. Instead, I began to clear a narrow path toward the edge of the street. As I worked, I saw the curtains twitch in the houses nearby. The neighbors, the Millers, the Gomezes, and the ever-watchful Regina were peering out. The snow the HOA plow had dumped on me wasn't the light, fluffy stuff. It was heart-attack snow, the heavy, wet mixture of salt, dirt, and packed ice. It was the kind of debris the city usually hauls away in trucks. By dumping it on my private property, Regina hadn't just been a nuisance. She'd created a drainage hazard that, according to the very bylaws she loved to quote, was illegal. I reached the edge of my property line. I looked at the street, which the HOA had paid to have cleared by pushing everything onto me. The asphalt was black and smooth, a pristine ribbon of privilege. "All right, Regina," I muttered under my breath, adjusting the discharge chute of the old beast. "Let's talk about redistribution of assets. I didn't just plow my driveway. I attacked the wall." The machine chewed through the icy rampart, the steel augers grinding with a satisfying crunch. I aimed the chute. I didn't aim it at a neighbor's yard. I didn't aim it at a car. I aimed it directly back into the center of the HOA-maintained street. The beauty of a twin-stage blower is the velocity. The snow didn't just fall. It flew in a high, elegant arc, landing squarely in the middle of the cul-de-sac's intersection. Within 20 minutes, I had cleared my driveway, but the street was now impassable. A massive, jagged ridge of gray slush ran right across the main exit point of the circle. I wasn't done. I moved to the common area island, a patch of grass. Regina insisted on decorating with expensive, fragile stone gnomes, and cleared the perimeter, sending every flake back onto the blacktop. The front door of the Vance residence flew open. Regina marched down her salt-dusted walkway, her face nearly as red as her designer scarf. "Elias Thorne!" She screamed over the roar of the engine. "Stop that this instant! What do you think you're doing?" I throttled the engine down to a low rumble but didn't turn it off. The smell of gasoline and cold air felt like victory. "Good morning, Regina. Just doing some clearing. You know how it is. Safety first. You're putting snow back into the street," she shrieked, pointing at the mountain I'd built. "The HOA just paid $400 for that plow service. You're obstructing a private thoroughfare." "Actually," I said, pulling a laminated sheet of paper from my pocket. "The Silver Pine Estates bylaws. Section 4, paragraph B. The bylaws state that no homeowner shall discharge or accumulate debris, including frozen precipitation, onto the property of another. Your plow driver dumped the entire street's worth of ice on my lot. I'm simply returning lost property." "That's for the common good," she countered, her voice pitching higher. "You're being a malcontent. I'll have you fined for this. I'll have a lien on your house." At this point, Mr. Miller from 2 doors down stepped out onto his porch. Then the Gomez's. They had watched the plow dump the snow on me earlier. They weren't blind. They knew what Regina had ordered. "He's got a point, Regina," Miller called out, leaning against his railing. "That plow driver spent 10 minutes specifically piling it on Elias's curb. It looked a bit targeted, don't you think?" Regina spun around, her eyes wide. "It's efficient routing. It's the way the contractor does it." "Then the contractor needs a lesson in physics," I said, clicking the machine back into gear. I finished the last section. The street was now blocked by a 5-foot-tall, 30-foot-long barricade of icy sludge. I had my driveway back, and the HOA had a problem. Regina couldn't get her Lexus out. The mail truck wouldn't be able to get in. I turned off the machine. The silence that followed was heavy. "Fix it," Regina hissed. "Clear the street, or I'm calling the police." "Call them," I said calmly. "I'd love to show the officers the security footage from my doorbell camera. It shows the HOA hired plow purposefully, diverting public way snow onto private property. I believe the term is intentional, property damage, and creating a hazardous condition." Regina's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked at the neighbors, but for the first time in years, no one was looking at her with fear. They were looking at her with a mix of exhaustion and newfound courage. "The snow stays where it landed," I said. "Unless, of course, the HOA wants to hire a proper removal service to actually haul it away rather than using my lawn as a landfill. And while we're at it, I think we should discuss the upcoming board elections." The next few hours were a flurry of activity, but of a different kind. The commoners of Silver Pine Estates began to converge in the street. Mr. Miller brought out a thermos of coffee. The Gomez's brought out shovels, but they didn't clear the street for Regina. They started helping each other. We spent the afternoon working as a group, clearing the elderly Mrs. Gable's walkway and making sure the fire hydrant was visible. We left the wall in the middle of the street exactly where it was. Regina remained trapped in her driveway, watching from behind her window. She had called the police, but when the cruiser arrived and the officer saw the layout and saw my footage, he simply told her it was a civil matter regarding HOA mismanagement and warned her about the illegality of the initial plow's actions. By sunset, the cul-de-sac looked different. The street was still blocked to cars, but the spirit of the neighborhood had thawed. We had reached a consensus. Regina's time as the neighborhood dictator was over. That evening, a different plow company arrived, one hired by a frantic Regina out of her own pocket. They spent 3 hours hauling the snow away in trucks. It cost her a fortune. I sat on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the yellow lights of the trucks flash against the dark sky. The old beast was tucked away in the shed, cooling down. As the last truck pulled away, leaving the street truly clear for the first time, Regina stepped out one last time. She looked at my house. I raised my mug to her. She didn't say a word. She just went inside and turned off the porch light. The title of homeowner usually implies you own a piece of land, but that day I realized it also meant owning your dignity. I watched the HOA dump snow on my property, and in return, I showed them that a mountain of ice is nothing compared to the cold. Resolve of a man who's had enough. The next morning, the sun came out. The snow began to melt, dripping rhythmically from the eaves. It was a beautiful sound, the sound of a fresh start.